Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you listeners suggest and really dig into them, pull out the most interesting bits.
That's right. And today we're heading into Christopher McDougall's Born to Run, A Hidden Tribe, Super Athletes, and the Greatest Race the World Has Never Seen, a book that clearly resonated with a lot of people.
It really did. And just a note, this deep dive is brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries. So our mission here basically is to unpack the key ideas, the main takeaways, find those memorable quotes and stories.
And figure out why this book still gets people talking.
Exactly. So where does it start?
Well, it kicks off with the Tarahumara people, and McDougall paints them as these, almost mythical figures, Stone Age super athletes hiding out in Mexico's Copper Canyons.
The Barrancas del Cobre.
Right. And the reputation is, well, they might be the greatest runners of all time, covering these just unbelievable distances. We're talking outrunning horses, cheetahs, even Olympic marathoners, supposedly.
It's such a powerful image. This tribe, hidden away in this incredibly tough environment, jaguars, snakes, something called canyon fever.
Yeah, sounds pretty intense.
And yet you hear these stories, these anecdotes about them doing things that sound almost superhuman.
Like catching a deer just by running it down.
Exactly. Or just cruising through those canyons way faster than a mule could manage. It makes you wonder about, human potential.
And it's not just about the running, is it? The book emphasizes their serenity, their health.
Yeah, which is such a contrast to, well, us. Our modern lives often full of stress and aches and pains.
So that contrast is set up right from the start.
Yeah.
Them, seemingly injury-free, versus modern runners.
Where injury seems almost inevitable, it really forces you to ask if we've lost touch with something fundamental about running.
Absolutely. And that's where McDougall pivots. He looks at modern running, and the picture isn't pretty. He throws out this statistic. Something like 8 out of 10 runners get injured every year.
8 out of 10, that's huge. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it? You see runners everywhere, but most are apparently dealing with injuries.
And he gets into the foot itself, how incredibly sensitive it is. All those nerves connecting up to the brain, the nervous system, even, surprisingly, linking to reproductive organs.
He even mentions the bastonado, that old, brutal punishment of beating the soles of the feet, just to hammer home how sensitive they are.
That's laying the groundwork, isn't it? For later arguments about footwear. But he also makes it personal. His own story.
Right, his own struggles. The constant injuries, the expensive orthotics, the cortisone shots. That whole frustrating cycle.
Many runners can probably relate to that feeling of being sort of broken, even though it seems so common.
Yeah, and there's that great quote he includes. There's something so universal about that sensation, the way running unites our two most primal impulses. Fear and pleasure.
Captures it perfectly, that push-pull.
And he talks about seeing himself on a treadmill video, thinking he looked graceful like a Navajo on the hunt.
But the reality was...
Different. Yeah, kind of clumsy, inefficient. And then Dr. Davis's comment, so gentle but so direct. Running is tough on the legs, especially your legs, big fella.
Ouch. But it highlights the paradox, right? Why do we get hurt doing this natural thing when wolves and antelope who run to survive don't seem to have the same issues?
Which leads right back to the Tarahumara. How do they run?
Well, not on nice flat surfaces, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They're on these incredibly tough, rocky canyon trails.
Makes you think about elite athletes like Lance Armstrong, struggling with a standard marathon distance.
Well, the Tarahumara seem to handle ultra distances almost casually. There's even a mention of a Dr. Dale Groom back in '71.
Yeah. What did he say?
He compared their conditioning to ancient Spartans. High praise.
Wow. But they use this fitness peacefully, right? It's just part of their way of life, not for war.
Exactly. And McDougall presents them as this kind of puzzle full of contradictions. Gentle but tough.
Battered-looking legs, but incredibly springy.
Basic diet, but super healthy.
Illiterate yet wise.
Hard work.
Yeah.
They seem to find joy in it. It challenges all our modern assumptions about fitness and health.
And then the story takes a turn, introduces this element of mystery, the search for Caballo Blanco.
Ah, yes, the white horse. This sort of legendary figure, an outsider living among the Tarahumara, running like them.
He becomes McDougall's focus, his guide into their world, in a way.
And the search itself is part of the adventure. McDougall's first trip in was Salvador. It really drives home how remote and difficult that landscape is.
He brings in historical accounts too, right? Like Lumholtz in the 1890s?
Yeah, quoting him, to travel over them is exhaustive to muscle and patience. Really paints a picture.
And it wasn't just physically hard. There was this air of elusiveness. Another explorer, Shrouded, wondering how kids even survived there.
And that story about hearing the Tarahumara drums, but never seeing anyone.
The Tarahumara can't be seen unless they want to be. Chilling, almost. Adds to the mystique.
And there's the modern danger, too. The brief mention of drug cartels operating in the area.
Right.
Just another layer of why you wouldn't just wander in.
But mostly it's about the Tarahumara themselves, their desire for primacy, how long it takes to gain trust, Ángel Nava López saying.
Años y años, years and years. Like Caballo Blanco. It takes that kind of commitment.
And the legends around Caballo grow. The boys thinking he was a ghost, a chewy.
Builds the myth. And Angel's perspective, being half Mexican, half Tarahumara, is really interesting. That line, you're alive because your father can run down a deer.
Wow. Such a direct link between running and survival.
And Angel feeling that Caballo, the outsider, understood their traditions better than some raw morty nowadays. El caballo sabe, the horse gets it.
It's a powerful endorsement. Though McDougall wonders, briefly, if the whole Caballo story is just a way to keep people away.
A kind of gatekeeping myth. But the story moves on, and we learn more about their culture, like the ball race, Rago Hipari.
That sounds incredible. Not just a race, but this huge cultural event. Endurance, skill, betting, drinking tesguino.
The corn beer, yeah. It's woven into the fabric of their society.
And then there's the fuel escape, chia fresca.
Right. Lumholtz tried it back in the day and was amazed. His quote was something like,
I at once felt new strength, and to my own astonishment, climbed the great height without much effort.
pretty strong testimonial. And McDougall explains the nutritional power of chia seeds, how the Aztecs and Hopis used them too. Ancient superfood.
So eventually, McDougall does find Caballo.
Yeah, after asking around villages, the first meeting is a bit tense. Apparently, Caballo was just really hungry.
Huh, relatable.
And then you get a sense of Caballo's personality, talks really fast, jumps around. A real character.
And Caballo has this big idea, right? This vision.
Exactly. To organize a race, but more than that, to bring some Tarahumara runners to the Leadville 100 race in Colorado.
Leadville, now that's a different world entirely. High altitude, tough mining town history.
Ken Klauber's quote sums it up. Folks who live at 10,000 feet are cut from a different kind of leather.
And the race itself was controversial at first, wasn't it? 100 miles at that altitude sounded crazy to some doctors.
Yeah, and the book touches on the origins of these crazy ultramarathons. Gordy Ainsleigh basically inventing the Western States 100 by running a horse race course on foot.
And the kind of people Leadville attracts. Steve Peterson, Marshall Ulrich getting his toenails removed.
And Aaron Ralston, who cut his own arm off, running it with a prosthetic leg. The takeaway is clear. You don't have to be fast, but you better be fearless.
So Rick Fisher wants to bring the Tarahumara there, create a spectacle, but people were skeptical, right?
Very skeptical. And getting the Tarahumara runners themselves involved wasn't straightforward. Patrocinio had to do a lot of convincing.
But they get there. And how do they handle it?
That's the amazing part. They seem totally calm, normal. McDougall describes Victoriano looking like he just woke up from a nap during the race.
Well, everyone else is probably grimacing and suffering.
Right, and they finish quietly, almost unnoticed, like a fog moving across the mountains. Just incredible composure.
Then the focus shifts, introduces Ann Treason, a legend in her own right.
Oh yeah, an absolute ultra-running powerhouse.
Huh.
Running 55 miles in a day, just casually. She called running huge miles in the mountains very romantic.
Gives you a sense of her passion. And her first ultra, American River 50, dealing with poison oak, snakes.
She definitely earned her stripes. Wasn't instantly dominant, but she got there through sheer grit.
And the media pits her against the Tarahumara. Right. This kind of narrative gets built up.
Yeah, playing on outdated ideas about Tarahumara machismo, which the book says is totally wrong. Their society is apparently quite egalitarian.
So the race starts, Leadville, Anne goes out fast, really fast.
Blazing fast. And then comes that iconic moment at the first aid station, the Tarahumara.
They ditch the fancy rockports they were given.
And pull out their huraiks, their simple homemade tire tread sandals.
Incredible. Scott Tinley, the commentator, was just blown away. We're witnessing the most incredible demonstration of raw courage in sports today.
And McDougall uses this to talk about race strategy, the psychology of pursuit, referencing Prefontaine, Kasparov.
Letting the opponent burn themselves out. Anne's known for her hill climbing.
But Juan and Martimano just keep coming. Steady. Relentless.
And Anne gets a pacer, Carl. The book explains that role.
Yeah, the pacer. Not glamorous, but crucial in these long races, helping with pace, motivation, logistics.
This whole scene, the Horrocks versus the modern shoes, it leads into a discussion about older training methods, doesn't it?
Yeah, the top runners of the 70s, their training seemed almost basic now. Just tons of miles, hard effort, lots of camaraderie.
Frank Shorter saying, all we did was run, run, eat, and sleep.
But Bill Rogers adds that they actually enjoyed it. It wasn't a grind. Different vibe to today's often data-obsessed training.
And they were incredibly successful. Shorter, Rogers, Salazar, American marathoners were dominant then.
Which makes you wonder, did we lose something when training got more scientific? The injury rates didn't exactly plummet.
And then there's the story of Emil Zatopek. What a character.
Totally unique. Trained like a maniac, incredibly high volume, didn't care about looking stylish while running.
And he talked to his rivals during races, like full conversations.
So different from the intense focus you usually see. Just seemed like a genuinely friendly guy, even mid-competition.
And his achievement at the Helsinki Olympics in '52, winning the 5K, 10K, and the marathon.
Unprecedented. Especially since the marathon was his first ever. And that legendary question he asked Jim Peters.
Excuse me, this is my first marathon. Are we going too fast? You can't make this stuff up.
And the book contrasts him with Ron Clarke, the Australian runner who broke so many records.
But couldn't win the big one, the bloke who choked, they cruelly called him.
Yeah, a really tragic figure in some ways. And the story of Clarke visiting Zatopek later in Prague, when Zatopek had fallen out of favor, it's very poignant.
These stories feed into the observations of Coach Joe Vigil, right? He saw the Tarahumara running at Leadville.
And he was struck by their joy, their effortless movement. It solidified his belief in natural-born runners.
His idea being that our modern problems, injuries, and whatnot come from forgetting we're running people.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And he thought maybe Americans could learn from the Tarahumara, apply some of those principles.
But then there's the messy part, the controversy with Rick Fisher, the guy who brought them to Leadville.
Yeah, Ken Klauber, the race director, did not mince words. He was a pain in the ass.
Fisher made all sorts of wild accusations, didn't he? Fixed race, conspiracies.
Drug drinks, even sexual molestation claims. Really bizarre and unpleasant stuff that soured things.
Amidst all that drama, McDougall's still trying to figure out how Caballo runs, trying to learn the technique.
Yeah, he describes Caballo going uphill, seemingly without effort. Just floating up.
And Caballo has his own race idea now, back in the Copper Canyons, and he invites Scott Jurek.
The Scott Jurek, one of the biggest names in ultra running ever. It seems totally improbable that Jurek would go.
But Caballo felt a connection based on an interview.
Yeah, since a kindred spirit, someone who might understand the non-commercial vibe he was going for. Jurek himself had some unusual habits.
Still, getting the Tarahumara involved in Caballo's race was also tricky.
Always a challenge. But the possibility of running with legends like Manuel and Marcelino Luna, that got McDougall really excited.
And we learn more about Jurek. His dedication, staying after races to cheer everyone in.
That says a lot about him. And his decision to run Badwater right after Western States. Just insane toughness.
Badwater. The description is brutal. The Foreman grill in Mother Nature's cupboard. Death Valley heat.
And that story about the doctor doing an autopsy during the race, it's just otherworldly extreme.
And Luis Escobar gets mentioned. Another key ultra figure, photographer, race director, part of that unique community.
Then, for some comic relief, Jen and Billy arrive. The party kids.
Totally different energy. Their drunken antics in Leadville. Jen yelling, "Help! I'm surrounded by penises."
But they also represent something else, right? This audacious curiosity, inspired by Armstrong, Kerouac. Just going for it.
Yeah, embracing the adventure without being elite athletes. That photo of Jen smiling during a 30-miler is genuinely inspiring.
And then there's Barefoot Ted, another unforgettable character.
Very unique guy. Smart, eccentric, living this unconventional life.
And he finds the whole barefoot running community online, discovers this ancient wisdom about running without shoes.
The book brings in Leonardo da Vinci admiring the foot's design, Abebe Bikila winning the Olympic marathon barefoot in 1960.
It all builds the case for questioning modern footwear.
And we learn about Caballo's dislike for Creole, the town. It's tied to historical exploitation of the Tarahumara.
Yeah, figures like Enrique Creole. Caballo saw the town as representing everything negative that was encroaching on the canyons.
So you have this group forming, Caballo, Scott Jurek, Barefoot Ted, Jen and Billy. quite the mix.
Definitely. Lots of interesting interactions.
Yeah.
Jen teasing Billy, Scott observing Ted's barefoot style.
And that ongoing tension between Caballo and Ted about whether barefoot running is actually smart in the Broncos.
Right. Caballo's worried about the danger, the sharp rocks, everything.
The group heads off towards Batapilas, deeper into the canyons. Ted insists on riding on the bus roof.
Of course he does. Sets the stage for the next part of the journey.
And this is where the book really dives into the case against running shoes.
Yeah, citing experts like Dr. Daniel Lieberman from Harvard, his quote is pretty damning. Shoes that actually make our feet weak, cause us to overpronate, give us knee problems.
Overpronation being when your foot rolls inward too much.
Exactly. And the argument is supportive shoes might actually encourage that or weaken the muscles that would naturally prevent it.
And those injury stats, again, 65–80% injured annually, despite decades of shoe tech advancements.
It doesn't add up. Studies questioning stretching. Other experts like Dr. Pribbett and Dr. Irene Davis saying injury rates haven't improved.
And that shocking study by Dr. Bernard Marty, runners in expensive top-of-the-line shoes were more likely to get injured.
123% more likely, according to the book. And Coach Vinlanana saw more injuries when his runners got fancy free shoes.
McDougall's own experience at the clinic backs it up lower impact forces when he ran barefoot.
It's a compelling case. Then it connects to Arthur Lydiard's philosophy.
The legendary coach. His focus on high mileage, but at a conversational pace.
Meaning, easy enough that you can chat while running, building that aerobic base. Bill Bowerman struggled to keep up with Lydiard's group.
And Lydiard was pro-barefoot, too.
Yep. Run barefoot and you don't have all those troubles. Even Nike's research apparently showed how the foot wants to move naturally without shoes.
Because there's also that quick detour into the Tarahumara drinking parties, the Tesquinadas.
Bob Francis's account of how different they act, usually so reserved, then becoming really dramatic and expressive.
Fascinating cultural insight. Then the group starts the big hike into the canyons.
And Jen and Billy show up late, underprepared, no water, minimal gear.
Classic. While Ted is trying to win his bet with Caballo by hiking barefoot on that brutal terrain.
High stakes for Ted's feet.
And Scott Jurick's diet gets mentioned again. Him being vegan or vegetarian.
Yeah, and the book points to other endurance legends with similar diets. The marathon monks in Japan, Percy Cerroti, challenges the meat equals strength myth.
Meanwhile, Jen and Billy are really suffering without water.
Desperately thirsty. Until they finally find that pool. Must have been immense relief.
McDougall comes back from this trip changed, trying to run like Caballo taught him, visualizing the form.
Trying to internalize it. And then we get Jenny Blake's story.
Running in the Idaho backcountry to deal with body image issues. Running naked.
Yeah, finding this sense of freedom and connection with her body and nature through running, away from judgment. Very powerful.
McDougall, still plagued by injuries, though, leads him to Eric Orton.
The coach who thinks about movement differently. Breaking down skills. He saw the Tarahumara ball race, Rajapari, as perfect running training.
Learning coordination, agility, focus, endurance, all while chasing a ball.
Exactly. And Eric offers to train McDougall for Caballo's race, a real lifeline.
Eric brings in ideas from Ken Muirk, too, focusing on biomechanics.
Right. Muirk studied Kenyan runners, trying to understand their efficiency. Biomechanics, just the science of how the body moves.
So Eric's training involves hill repeats, heart rate monitoring, getting McDougall to run smarter, not just harder.
Using Muirk's ideas on pace and echoing Lydiard's conversational pace advice. And it works. McDougall improves dramatically.
The book also touches on the Tarahumara diet again, connecting it to lower cancer rates.
It's Dr. Weinberg's perspective, and that JAMA report suggesting animal proteins might fuel cancer recurrence. Coach Vigil's line is memorable: eat like a poor person and you'll only see your doctor on the golf course.
Simple, whole foods. Then McDougall has this spontaneous moment.
The barefoot run in winter. Recapturing that feeling, that connection he felt running with Caballo.
It's a real turning point for him, and this leads into the evolutionary biology part, why humans run.
David Carrier's theories, Dr. Dennis Bramble. Looking at our diaphragm, back flexibility, how we're unique as running bipeds.
Bramble was skeptical at first, apparently. Humans seem inefficient compared to, say, a cheetah.
But Bramble realized we're unique, tailless running bipeds. And our breeding isn't locked to our stride like four-legged animals. Plus, we sweat.
Sweating is key for endurance, right? Cooling ourselves over long distances.
Huge advantage. Which ties into the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Lieberman's research on head size, diet, running.
Contrasting our ancestors, the running men, with Neanderthals who were maybe more power-focused, less endurance-based.
And that leads to persistence hunting.
Right. The idea of literally running prey down over hours. Carrier tried it himself with an antelope.
Didn't quite work for him. But the Bushmen in Africa still practiced it. Louis Liebenberg documented it. Incredible endurance and tracking skill.
It requires deep engagement, reading the animal, the terrain, not just physical effort.
Then there's the question of age and running. Bramble's analysis of marathon times.
Peaking around age 27, but holding strong for a long time after. And that great quote from the Dipsy Demon.
You don't stop running because you get old. You get old because you stop running. Classic.
Holds true for women, too.
Mm.
And the book notes an evolutionary trend towards more equal size between sexes, suggesting women were likely involved in hunting, too.
So the picture emerges of early humans as these collaborative, running hunters. But Bramble points out our mind-body conflict. Our brains want to conserve energy.
Even though our bodies are built for endurance, you have to consciously push past that comfort zone.
His final message is powerful. Just move your legs. Because if you don't think you were born to run, you're not only denying history, you're denying who you are.
It gives you chills, and it all culminates in Caballo's race day in Urique.
The atmosphere sounds amazing. Festive, chaotic. Jen and Billy, the party kids, are there. Ted in some wild outfit, no doubt.
The whole town welcomes them. The race starts, pure chaos. Jen goes out strong.
But then takes a fall. Tita encourages her. Puedes, cariño, puedes. You can do it, darling.
Captures the spirit. The competition is close, exciting.
And McDougall has this lovely experience running alongside some Tarahumara kids for a while.
That sense of connection. And Bob Francis showing up with juice for McDougall. Unexpected kindness.
Really embodies that running community spirit.
And finally, we learn Caballo's backstory. He wasn't always Caballo Blanco.
No, he was Micah True. A fighter, the cowboy, had a whole different life.
Until he met Smitty in Maui, started doing these intense night runs up Mount Haleakala.
Found something else in running. Got disillusioned with fighting. Maybe realized he was fighting for love, not out of anger.
And his time in Leadville with Martimano Cervantes was pivotal, seeing the Tarahumara spirit.
It all led to his vision for the Copper Canyon race. Not about money or sponsors.
Just about running, community, freedom. Running should be free, man. His core belief.
Beautiful sentiment. And the book ends with acknowledgments, a note about McDougall.
Bringing it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Born to Run, what are the big takeaways?
Well, obviously the incredible story of the Tarahumara, their culture, their running.
The critique of modern running culture, especially the shoes and the high injury rates.
The idea of evolutionary adaptation that we are born to run, essentially.
The sheer joy of movement, rediscovering that connection.
And the inspiring, if complex, figure of Caballo Blanco and his vision.
It definitely makes you think differently about running, health, maybe even how we're supposed to live.
It does. It challenges assumptions and offers this really compelling alternative view, rooted in ancient practices and evolutionary science.
So the final thought to leave listeners with, could tapping into that born-to-run nature actually lead to a happier, healthier life? What part of this whole story sticks with you the most?
Lots to think about there.
Indeed. And remember, this deep dive was brought to you by Ben's Book Summaries. If you enjoyed this exploration, definitely check them out for more concise book insights.